said the fire destroyed almost the entire set.
Yeah, it was huge.
But get this, the only part of the set that wasn't destroyed by the fire was Regan's bedroom, where the exorcism takes place. It was almost symbolic, as if whatever evil force was at work wanted to protect that space.
Today, on Deep Dive into Horror.
It burns! Oh, it burns!
Welcome, horror aficionados and film enthusiasts. Today, we're diving deep into one of the most iconic and terrifying films in cinematic history, The Exorcist. Released in 1973 and based on William Peter Blatty's novel, this film not only revolutionized the horror genre, but also sparked conversations about faith, fear, and the supernatural. The Exorcist follows the harrowing journey of a mother, Chris McNeil, as she witnesses her young daughter Regan's terrifying transformation and possession by a demonic entity. With the help of two priests, they confront the malevolent forces in a battle that pushes the boundaries of sanity and belief. In today's episode, we'll explore the film's chilling production, its groundbreaking effects, and the profound impact it has had on pop culture and the horror genre. We'll also discuss the real-life inspiration behind the story and the controversies it ignited upon release. So grab your holy water and get ready to face your fears as we uncover the dark legacy of The Exorcist.
Our story begins in Iraq, where Father Marin, a seasoned Catholic priest and archaeologist, is on a dig. He uncovers a mysterious statue of the demon Pazuzu, a malevolent entity that will play a pivotal role later in the film. The discovery foreshadows the battle between ancient evil forces and the church that's about to unfold. Meanwhile, we are introduced to Chris McNeil, a successful actress living in Georgetown with her 12-year-old daughter, Regan. Chris is busy filming a movie and juggling her single-parent responsibilities, while Regan enjoys the simple joys of childhood. However, there's an underlying tension. Strange noises echo through the house, and an eerie sense of unease begins to creep in. Things take a dark turn when Regan begins to exhibit bizarre, disturbing behavior. She complains of hearing strange sounds in her room and begins to act aggressively. Initially, her behavior is attributed to psychological or physical issues. Chris, frightened and confused, consults multiple doctors. Despite numerous tests, no clear diagnosis is given, leaving her with more questions than answers. Regan's symptoms escalate rapidly, her voice changes, she exhibits supernatural strength, and violent outbursts become frequent. Most famously, she demonstrates extreme physical contortions and begins to speak in languages she's never learned. One of the most iconic moments in horror history unfolds here. Regan's head spins 360 degrees, solidifying her possession. At this point, medical science has no answers. Frustrated and terrified, Chris turns to religion for help. Enter Father Karras, a Jesuit priest and psychologist. He's grappling with his own crisis of faith, deeply affected by the recent death of his mother and his growing doubt in his spiritual beliefs. Despite his skepticism, Chris begs him to help Regan, believing that something beyond medical science is plaguing her daughter. Karras begins by observing Regan and initially suspects that she might be mentally ill rather than possessed. But as the paranormal activity intensifies, objects levitate, Regan's voice becomes increasingly guttural, and the demonic personality within her reveals personal details about Karras' life. He starts to believe that she is, indeed, possessed by a demonic force. Realizing he's out of his depth, Father Karras seeks the help of a more experienced exorcist, Father Marin. Father Marin arrives, setting the stage for the climactic battle between the priests and the demon inside Regan. The exorcism scenes are some of the most intense and terrifying in cinematic history. The room becomes a battleground, with temperatures plummeting and objects flying through the air. The demon within Regan taunts the priests, using their fears and doubts against them. Marin is stoic, having faced this evil before, while Karras is visibly shaken, still wrestling with his faith. During the ritual, Regan levitates, speaks in multiple voices, and vomits green bile, all while exhibiting enormous physical strength. The battle takes a toll on Marin, who is older and physically weakened. He dies during the exorcism, leaving Karras to face the demon alone. In a desperate act of sacrifice, Karras challenges the demon to take him instead of Regan. The demon accepts, and Karras is momentarily possessed. In an act of final redemption, he throws himself out of the window, plunging to his death, and freeing Regan from the demonic hold.
There's something about The Exorcist. It got under people's skin and just never let go.
It really did. So, for this deep dive, I guess we should just dive right in, huh?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so we know it's about demonic possession, obviously, but this whole based on a true story thing, that's not just a marketing gimmick with this film, is it? I mean, I did some reading, and the author of the book, William Peter Blatty, he got really obsessed with this real-life case from 1949.
Obsessed is one word for it. But look, you gotta understand, Blatty was a devout Catholic. In that case, the one with the boy, it really shook him. I mean, here he was, this guy with strong faith, and suddenly he's confronted with something that seems like, well, pure evil.
So this wasn't just him trying to write a scary story, huh? He was wrestling with some pretty big ideas.
Oh, absolutely. This was personal for him. He needed to explore these themes of good and evil, faith and doubt. He wanted to understand how something like this could happen, especially in a world where faith is supposed to protect you.
And that's where all the research comes in, right? I mean, the guy went all out. Didn't he track down the priests who performed the actual exorcism?
He did. And he interviewed witnesses, people who knew the boy. He even got his hands on the boy's diaries. Can you imagine reading those firsthand accounts, trying to understand what was going on in that kid's head?
Must have been chilling, to say the least. Okay, so we've got this intensely personal story, deeply rooted in this real-life horror. And then we get to the film production itself, and things get even weirder, right? Because wasn't The Exorcist plagued with all sorts of strange accidents and even deaths?
Yeah. I mean, there was that fire on set, destroyed a big chunk of the production. And then you had Ellen Burstyn. She got that really serious back injury during filming. Plus, two of the actors, Jack McGowan and Vasiliki Miliaros, they died shortly after finishing their scenes.
It's hard not to see that and think, okay, maybe there's something cursed about this movie.
Right. Whether or not you believe in that sort of thing, it definitely added to the atmosphere on set. I mean, you're trying to make a movie about demonic possession, and all this creepy stuff starts happening around you.
Yeah.
It must have messed with people's heads.
Especially with William Friedkin directing. This wasn't your typical Hollywood director.
Not even close. Friedkin, he was intense, a real method director in the sense that he wanted everything to feel as real as possible. And if that meant making his actors uncomfortable, well, so be it.
Yeah, I read about some of his methods. Didn't he fire real guns on set to get genuine reactions from the cast?
He did. He also had Regan's bedroom set built inside this giant refrigerator. Like, they kept it freezing cold in there so you could see the actor's breath.
That's crazy. But I guess that was Friedkin's whole thing, right? To blur the line between fiction and reality.
Exactly. He wanted the audience to feel like they were right there in the middle of the horror, experiencing it alongside the characters. And to do that, he figured, why not make it as real as possible for the actors?
Right.
I mean, take that levitation scene, right? The one where Reagan's just floating there. That wasn't some fancy special effect. They used wires, harnesses, the whole deal. Linda Blair was actually being yanked around on set.
Oh, man. Yeah, I read about Ellen Burstyn getting hurt. I bet that wasn't fun. Okay, so Friedkin might have been a little out there with his methods, but you can't deny the results. I mean, those effects hold up even today. But effects are only as good as the actors selling them, right? And the performances in The Exorcist are, well, they're legendary.
They really are something else. Linda Blair as Regan. I mean, she was, 13 years old when they filmed that? And she had to go to some incredibly dark places for that role.
Just thinking about those close-ups on her face, the way she transforms, it's still unsettling to watch. But, you know, it's funny, that voice, the demon voice, that actually wasn't Linda Blair, right?
Nope. That was all Mercedes McCambridge. She was a veteran actress, and she went all in on that role. I mean, we're talking raw eggs, chain smoking. There are even stories about her asking to be bound and gagged during recording sessions just to get that raw, unhinged sound.
Wow. Talk about dedication. And speaking of dedication, we got to talk about Ellen Burstyn as Chris McNeil, Regan's mom. It's easy to get caught up in the whole demonic possession thing, but at its core, The Exorcist is a story about a mother's love for her child.
Totally. I mean, that's what makes it so terrifying, right? This isn't some slasher flick. This is a parent's worst nightmare.
Yeah.
And Burstyn, she just nails that sense of terror, that desperation to save her daughter. You can feel her pain.
Absolutely. And then there's Father Karras, Jason Miller. I think his performance is often overlooked, but it's so crucial to the film. He's not your typical movie priest. He's got doubts, insecurities, his own personal demons he's battling.
He's a man of faith, but he's also a man of science. He's struggling to reconcile those two sides of himself, especially when confronted with something as inexplicable as demonic possession.
And that's what makes him such a great counterpoint to Father Merrin, played by the incredible Max von Sydow. Merrin, he's the real deal. He's seen it all, fought it all. You get this sense that he's carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders.
Right, you could just feel the history there.
Yeah.
He's been waging this battle against darkness for a long, long time. And now he's passing the torch, so to speak, to Karras. It adds a whole other layer to the story. But yeah, those performances, they're all top-notch.
Yeah.
It's not just about screaming and special effects. It's about these characters, these flawed, relatable human beings caught up in something they don't understand.
And that's what makes it terrifying, because deep down, we can all relate to that feeling of helplessness, that fear of the unknown. Okay, but we've talked a lot about the film's impact, how it really got under people's skin. But what about its legacy? I mean, The Exorcist spawned sequels, a prequel, even a TV series. Why do you think this one film, out of all horror movies out there, sparked so many attempts to recapture that magic?
Well, you got to remember, The Exorcist was a phenomenon when it was released. People were lining up around the block to see it, some fainting in the aisles, others claiming they were possessed afterward. It was more than just a movie. It was an event. And I think studios saw that and thought, hey, we can cash in on this.
And yet, for all the sequels and prequels and reboots, none of them really came close, did they? It's like trying to catch lightning in a bottle twice. What is it about the original that made it so special, so impossible to replicate?
Well, for one thing, The Exorcist came out at a very specific cultural moment, the 70s. There was this kind of a collective anxiety in the air. You know? The Vietnam War, Watergate, social upheaval, people were looking for answers, for something to believe in.
Yeah.
And I think The Exorcist tapped into that. It gave people a tangible enemy, something to fear, in a world that already felt pretty scary.
So it wasn't just the horror itself, it was the timing. It hit a nerve, so to speak.
Exactly. It resonated with audiences in a way that few horror films ever have.
Yeah.
Plus, you can't discount the craft, the acting, the special effects, the direction. Friedkin, he knew how to get under your skin. He didn't rely on cheap scares. He built atmosphere, created this sense of dread that just stayed with you long after the credits rolled.
Yeah, and you've got to mention the religious aspect, too. I mean, how many horror movies really delve into questions of faith and doubt, good versus evil?
Right. It took those themes seriously, didn't shy away from them. And that's rare, especially in a genre that's often more concerned with blood and guts. But The Exorcist, it made you think. It challenged your beliefs, or maybe even made you question whether you believed in anything at all.
It's fascinating, though, how even with all the advancements in special effects, all the CGI and gore we have in movies today, The Exorcist still holds up. Why do you think that is? What makes those old school scares so effective, even decades later?
Because they're not really about the special effects, are they? They're about atmosphere, about suggestion. The power of The Exorcist lies in what you don't see, in the things it makes you imagine. It's about that creeping sense of dread, that feeling that something is deeply, terribly wrong, even if you can't quite put your finger on it.
And that's something that's very hard to replicate, no matter how much technology you throw at it.
Exactly. It's like trying to explain a nightmare to someone. The words can never quite capture the feeling, the sheer visceral terror of it all. And in a way, that's what makes The Exorcist so brilliant. It taps into something primal, something deep within our collective unconscious.
Well, I think we've done a pretty good job unpacking The Exorcist. From the real-life events that inspired it to the cultural phenomenon it became. We talked about the groundbreaking filmmaking techniques, the unforgettable performances. It's a film that continues to spark debate, to challenge our beliefs, and yeah, to scare the living daylights out of us.
It's a classic for a reason, and I have a feeling people will still be talking about it 50 years from now.
I wouldn't doubt it. Well, for the deep dive, I'm your host, signing off. And remember, sometimes the scariest monsters are the ones we create in our own minds.